On January 31st, 2025, after spending over 2 decades on death row, 44-year-old Marion Bowman Jr. was executed by lethal injection at South Carolina's Broad River Correctional Institution. In this video, we will find out what his last meal was and what his final words were. But to truly understand the gravity of those final moments, we must travel back 24 years to a cold February night in 2001, to a crime so brutal it would haunt a community and seal one man's fate. The night started like any other for firefighters in Dorchester County, South Carolina. A call came in about a vehicle fire. Routine. Nothing unusual. They grabbed their gear and rushed to the scene, expecting to douse some flames and file a report. But when they arrived and finally managed to extinguish the blaze, they made a discovery that transformed everything. Through the smoke and heat-warped metal, they peered into the charred trunk of the burning car. What they saw would stay with them forever. Inside lay the body of 21-year-old Candy Louise Martin. She'd been shot multiple times. Someone had tried to burn away the evidence, to erase her very existence with fire. Candy was just starting her life. A young mother with dreams and struggles like anyone else, working hard to build something for herself and her child. Marion Bowman Jr. wasn't a stranger to her. They'd gone to high school together, moved in similar circles. But according to prosecutors, their shared history didn't matter anymore. What mattered was money. Candy owed Bowman a debt, and he decided that debt would be paid, one way or another. The investigation gained momentum quickly. Within days, witnesses began emerging from the shadows, each one adding another piece to a horrifying puzzle. The picture they painted was chilling. This wasn't a crime of passion or a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was calculated, cold, methodical, and it all centered on a debt that some reports suggested was barely enough to cover a week's groceries. February 16, 2001. That was the day everything came to a head. Earlier that afternoon, Bowman had a conversation with his sister. What he said next would become one of the most damning pieces of evidence against him. As he talked about Candy and the money she owed, his words turned dark, venomous. "That bitch be dead by dark," he reportedly told her. It was more than just talk. It was a promise. His sister would later take the stand and repeat those words to a jury, her voice shaking as she recalled the look in her brother's eyes. Did she believe him in that moment? Did she think he was capable of murder? We'll never know for certain. What we do know is that she didn't warn Candy. She didn't pick up the phone and call the police. And when the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, her brother's words became reality. So how did Bowman get Candy alone? He lured her to a remote area, far from prying eyes and potential witnesses. The location was no accident. Bowman had chosen carefully. No street lights to illuminate what was about to happen. No houses nearby. No late-night joggers or passing cars. Just the vast emptiness of rural South Carolina, where the only sounds were whined through trees and the distant chorus of crickets. It was the perfect place for murder. They stepped out of Candy's car together. And that's when Bowman revealed his true intentions. He pulled a gun. The first shots shattered the quiet night. Candy fell, her body hitting the ground hard. In those desperate, terrifying moments, Candy's thoughts weren't for herself. They were for her baby. Wounded, bleeding, and staring death in the face, Candy did what any mother would do. She fought for her life with the only weapon she had left, her words. She begged Bowman to spare her. She pleaded with him to think about what he was doing. She told him about her child, the baby waiting at home who needed a mother. Bowman stood there and listened. He heard every desperate plea. He looked into her eyes and saw her terror, her pain, her love for her child. And then, unmoved by her suffering, he raised the gun again. The shots rang out. Once, twice, until Candy Louise Martin stopped moving, until her pleas fell silent, until the young mother, who'd begged for her life, lay dead on the cold ground. But Bowman's work wasn't finished. With help from an accomplice, he grabbed Candy's body and dragged it through the dirt into the woods. Her blood painted a trail behind them, a crimson path that would later help investigators reconstruct the horror of that night. Yet even this wasn't enough. Bowman needed to destroy the evidence, to make it seem like Candy had simply vanished into thin air. So they hauled her lifeless body back to her own car, stuffed it into the trunk, and set the vehicle ablaze. The flames roared to life, consuming metal and flesh alike. The heat was so intense it warped the car's frame and charred bone. They watched it burn, convinced that the fire would erase their sins, that it would reduce the evidence to nothing but ash and unanswered questions. But fire can't burn away the truth. And when those firefighters arrived and extinguished the blaze, Candy was still there, waiting to tell her story. By May 2002, Marion Bowman Jr. found himself in a courtroom, standing trial for murder. He was only 20 years old, a young man who should have been thinking about his future, about building a life. Instead, he was fighting for that life as witness after witness took the stand to testify against him. The jury heard it all. They heard about the threat he'd made to his sister hours before the murder. They heard about the isolated location he'd chosen. They heard testimony describing Candy's desperate final moments, her pleas for mercy that fell on deaf ears. They heard about the fire, the calculated attempt to destroy evidence and cover his tracks. Day after day, the prosecution built their case, each piece of testimony adding weight to the scales of justice. When it was over, the jury didn't hesitate. Guilty of murder. Guilty of third-degree arson. The judge handed down the sentence, death. Before the trial ever began, prosecutors had approached him with an offer, a plea deal. Plead guilty, they said, and we'll take death off the table. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison, but you'll live. You'll see your family. You'll have birthdays and Christmases. You'll have a life, even if it's behind bars. Bowman refused. He looked at that offer of guaranteed life and said no. He maintained his innocence, insisted he hadn't killed Candy Martin, and chose to roll the dice with a jury of his peers. It was a gamble, and he lost. That decision, made when he was barely out of his teens, would cost him everything. It would haunt his family for the next 23 years. His attorneys never stopped fighting. For more than 2 decades, they filed appeals, challenged evidence, sought new trials. They argued that the case against Bowman was built on a foundation of sand. Look at the prosecution's star witnesses, they said. Look closely. 3 people testified against Bowman, 3 people who'd been there that night. But these weren't neutral observers. These were accomplices, people who'd participated in Candy's murder. And all 3 had cut deals with the state. 2 of them received reduced sentences. A third had completely unrelated criminal charges dropped in exchange for their testimony. They had every incentive to point the finger at Bowman, to paint him as the shooter, the mastermind, the one responsible. They could save themselves by condemning him. But it got worse. Bowman's legal team uncovered what they claimed was suppressed evidence. A memo buried in the prosecution's files, suggesting that one of these accomplice witnesses had actually confessed to being the shooter. If that was true, if the state had hidden evidence that someone else had pulled the trigger, then everything changed. The entire case could have been built on lies. Appeal after appeal, Bowman's lawyers fought. They took the case through every level of the court system. They filed motions, presented evidence, made arguments. But the courts kept saying no. The conviction stood. the sentence stood. And by late 2024, every legal avenue had been exhausted. Every door had been closed. There was nothing left to do but set an execution date. South Carolina hadn't executed anyone in 13 years. It wasn't for lack of trying. The state had struggled to obtain the drugs needed for lethal injection, effectively putting capital punishment on indefinite hold. But in 2024, that changed. The state secured its supply. The execution chamber, dormant for over a decade, roared back to life. And Marion Bowman Jr.'s name was on the list. He stayed connected to his loved ones as much as the prison system allowed. Every phone call was precious. Every visit through bulletproof glass. Speaking through a telephone receiver while his family sat mere feet away, but impossibly distant, was a lifeline. He treasured these moments, hoarding memories like a man preparing for a long winter. And then, 1 week before his scheduled execution, something remarkable happened. Something Marion Bowman Jr. had never experienced in his entire adult life. He held his granddaughter for the first time. It was a gift and a cruelty all at once, a glimpse of everything he'd lost wrapped in a 7-pound bundle. When execution day finally arrived, the state offered Marion Bowman Jr. one last choice, his final meal. It's a strange tradition, this offering of food to a man about to die. A gesture of humanity, perhaps, or maybe just a way to make the executioners feel better about what they're about to do. Whatever the reasoning, Bowman didn't hold back. He ordered a feast fit for a celebration, if celebrations were held on the threshold of death. Southern comfort food, the kind of meal that conjures memories of family gatherings and better times, of life before everything went wrong. Fried shrimp, golden and crispy. Fried fish, tender and flaky. Fried oysters, briny and rich. Fried chicken wings and tenders, seasoned to perfection. Onion rings, their sweetness balanced by the crunch of batter. For dessert, banana pudding with its layers of vanilla wafers and whipped cream, and German chocolate cake, dense and sweet with coconut pecan frosting. To drink, cranberry juice and pineapple juice, bright and tart. For a few hours, at least, Marion Bowman Jr. could focus on something other than the gurney waiting in the next room, the IV line that would soon pierce his vein, the drug that would stop his heart. At 6:27 p.m. on January 31st, 2025, witnesses gathered in the viewing room adjacent to the execution chamber. They came for different reasons. Some were there for Candy, seeking closure after 24 years of waiting. Some were there for Bowman, bearing witness to what they believed was a miscarriage of justice. Some were there simply because the law required it, their presence lending official weight to what was about to happen. Marion Bowman Jr. was already strapped to the gurney when they arrived. Leather restraints secured his arms, his legs, his torso. He couldn't move, couldn't sit up, couldn't do anything but lie there and wait. He turned his head, looking through the glass at his attorney, and for a moment their eyes met. Then he stared up at the ceiling, his gaze fixed on something the witnesses couldn't see. The warden asked if he had any final words. One last chance to speak, to be heard, to leave something behind. Bowman's lawyer stepped forward and read his final statement aloud, his client's voice delivered through another man's mouth. "I did not kill Candy Martin." 5 words, clear and unequivocal. Even now, even at the very end with nothing left to gain or lose, Marion Bowman Jr. maintained his innocence. But his final words weren't just about himself. He turned his attention to Candy's family, the people who'd waited nearly a quarter century for this moment. "I know that Candy's family is in pain. They are justifiably angry. If my death brings them some relief and ability to focus on the good times and funny stories, then I guess it will have served a purpose. I hope they find peace." Then the drugs began to flow. His breathing changed, becoming shallow and irregular. The witnesses watched, some with satisfaction, some with horror, all unable to look away. His chest stopped rising and falling. The monitors flatlined. At 6:27 p.m., a physician stepped forward, performed the required examination, and made it official. Marion Bowman Jr. was pronounced dead. His execution was the third in South Carolina in just 4 months, part of the state's renewed embrace of capital punishment after a 13-year hiatus. It was also the first execution in the United States in 2025, setting the tone for what would likely be a year of resumed executions across the country. Candy Martin is dead. She was 21 years old, a mother with her whole life ahead of her. Her child grew up without her, missing birthdays and graduations and all the ordinary moments that make up a life.